It seems like all-in-one water coolers like this Asus Ryuo 3 240mm ARGB have become the de facto standard for gaming PC builds these days. I know that I use them constantly, but with the rat's nest worth of wires, the gaudy RGB LEDs, the built-in displays, and the noise, is it actually worth it? Are air coolers actually the better choice? Well, I'm not sure. So let's run some tests and find out. The air cooler I've gone with here is the bequiet Darkrock Pro 4, an all-black dual tower heatsink with 2 included fans and mounting hardware for a third, which should be a great fit for the Ryzen 7900X that I'll be using to test against. It's worth quickly looking at the AIO. This is an AIO design with a pretty massive and pretty hefty pump unit. Built into the top of that is a matrix of RGB LEDs that Asus calls their anime matrix display. In a stunning move, the contents of that display can't be rotated, which means if you install the pump the wrong way like I did, which for every other AIO on the market is the correct orientation and what I would argue is best for its longevity, you will not be able to read things like your CPU temperature, easily without turning your head. Amazing. What's also frustrating is that they clearly expect you to buy 2 more fans from them, as this RGB splitter that comes included has 4 heads on it. But they only include 2 fans, and they only include mounting hardware for those 2 fans. What are you meant to do? The Darkrock Pro 4, by comparison, is a beautiful example of simplicity and restraint. It's all black with not an LED in sight. That's weirdly refreshing to me. Now, this isn't perfect either. If you're installing this in an already built PC like I was, it's a bit of a pain to get installed. You'll need to lay the system down on its side and remove your graphics card to be able to fit the central fan in after you've used the incredibly long screwdriver to mount it in a sort of blind operation, no less. But once you have it mounted, you're good to go. If you're building your system from scratch, this isn't really a problem. Okay, let's do some testing. First off is the most obvious thing. How does each CPU cooler handle CPU loads like Cinebench R23 on loop for 30 minutes? The nice thing about this is that it will give me the final score too, so that we can see not only the temperature and power usage, but the outright performance as well. Looking at the temperature graph, it isn't looking too good for the air cooler. It isn't a massive difference, only about 4.5 degrees over the 30 minutes on average, but it's pretty undeniable that the air cooler is running hotter. The AIO runs at about 87 degrees Celsius, whereas the air cooler is more like 91. Looking at the power graph, we can see the air cooler runs a little lower power too, averaging 176 watts over the 30 minutes versus 180 watts from the AIO. This does make sense though. What doesn't is the Cinebench scores. The air cooler ended its run with almost 1,000 points more performance than the AIO. Now, that is only about 3% more performance, but I mean, all of the other results and data suggest that the air cooler should be slower and have less performance, not more. If anyone has any ideas here, please do leave them in the comments down below. Of course, it's pretty rare for people to exclusively do CPU-based work on their gaming PC, so what about when you're just gaming? I've got an RX 6900 XT in here, and the case is fully closed up as you would expect, as you would use it at home. So is there actually any difference, to your temperatures while gaming? Well, I went with Hitman 3 here, as its built-in benchmark has an endless loop mode, and is also a little more CPU heavy, which kind of makes this a bit of a worst case scenario for the coolers. So does it make a difference? No, not in the slightest. Both coolers sat comfortably around 65 degrees Celsius, basically throughout the run, with very little variation between the two. Performance-wise, after 30 minutes of heat soaking, it was what I would argue is within margin of error. The air was slightly cooler in the room when I was doing the air cooler testing, and therefore it ran slightly faster, but it's very much within margin of error here, so functionally it's pretty much the same. Now, there are a few other factors that you might want to consider, like noise. The air cooler is practically silent well, it's no louder than the rest of the case fans and was easily drowned out by the GPU fans while gaming. By contrast, the AIO is considerably noisier. I could hear the AIO while gaming and certainly while rendering in Cinebench. Now, that is something that seems to be somewhat of a known quantity with these Asus coolers. They just seem to be quite loud. You can check out some other reviews of these coolers and you'll see that commented a fair bit. But, I mean, the AIO is at least likely to be a little louder in general because, I mean, you have the same number of fans, but you also have more restriction on those fans with them trying to blow through the radiator, and you have the addition of the water pump too, which is obviously going to add more noise than no pumps and only 2 fans in the air cooler. The other thing to consider is longevity and reliability. The AIO will fail at some point. The fluid will slowly evaporate and the pump will fail. It might even fail catastrophically and leak all over your other components. The air cooler won't leave you high and dry, or I suppose low and wet, I guess. I mean, sure, the fans might fail, but I mean, that's a lot less likely than the pump failing on the AIO, and even then, if the fans were to fail, it will still act as a pretty decent passive heatsink, that keeps your CPU doing fine, if a little toasty, whereas if the pump dies in the AIO, your CPU just kind of gets cooked. The biggest downside to the air cooler is the weight. If you need to transport your system, especially via post, that can be a pretty big problem. And also just hanging that much weight that far away from your motherboard isn't the best thing for it. In short then, for CPU-specific tasks, an air cooler might struggle to keep up with a closed-loop water cooler, but in gaming it really doesn't make much of a difference. The air cooler is likely to be quieter and more reliable, but considerably heavier. If the gaudy RGB is your thing, I'm sure you can find some RGB air coolers too, although you would struggle to find one with a screen on top of it, if that's worth something to you as well. It is worth noting too that this Asus cooler is just ludicrously expensive. It's £250 for a 240mm AIO. The Dark Rock Pro 4 is a much more reasonable £80, although you can certainly get more reasonably priced and potentially better AIOs as well. The Arctic Liquid Freezer 2 240mm comes to mind on that one. I'll link to all of those in the description if you're interested, by the way. Of course, with that said, those are my thoughts, but I would love to hear yours in the comments down below. Are you running an AIO or an air cooler? And for your next build, is an air cooler something you would consider if you're already planning an AIO, or are you sticking with this? Feel free to let me know in those comments down below. Like I said, I'll link to everything that I've talked about here in the description if you're interested, and if you want to see more videos like this one, you can hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell notification icon. There's also plenty of other videos that will pop up in a second on the end cards. Feel free to take a look, and if you want to support the channel, you can do so through YouTube, Patreon, pick up a hoodie or t-shirt like this one, or a load of other ones that I designed myself. And there's also a load of other links in the description, places like Overclockers UK, if you're buying from there, that really helps. Otherwise, that's pretty much it. Hope you enjoyed it, thank you for watching, and we will see you all in the next video.